glasses of Moparing. I think we're live. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, you know, the thing that everybody says and asks and all that. Get some conditioned air flowing through here. So, open chat tonight. Typically in an open chat, talk a little bit about everything. Could be any kind of car stuff. Usually it's, you know, just generic, this car stuff in general. Recently put out an updated video for the teaser video that's called Scream, and actually it cracked it, I think. In fact, I'm pretty positive that I cracked that code entirely. So check out that video if you have not seen it yet. Definitely some good mathematics in there for you guys to play around with. You know, a lot of times when I put videos like that together, well, anytime I put videos together, they're never scripted. So that's somewhat of a bit of criticism with the show at one point in time is that the videos that I put out, you know, they don't seem like they're scripted because they're not. Everything that I do is literally just like me and you having a conversation. I don't really get too deep into, you know, trying to script things out or editing or anything like that. I mean, but the only type of editing that I ever really do is just pause editing, which is to say, if I'm in the middle of filming something, everything that you see is happening basically in sequence as it's happening. Sovereign's got the new screen video up there. Thank you, buddy. Let's see. Make sure I'm not missing anybody. Thank you, Sovereign. Sovereign, one of the moderators, is in. Bruce is in, saying, good evening, Mr. Mason. Hope all is well. Joining the chat while I enjoy a good cigar, my friends. Very cool. Captain Sin saying, what's that, Professor? Got the cadence down with the flex and the shades. The bald guy with the shades. I like it. So, anyway, yeah, the latest. Ardell's in. What's up, man? Marco is in. What's up, guys? So yeah, it looks like I cracked the code on the latest video. And really, if you've ever opened up a direct connection catalog and just perused in there a little bit, you would have seen kind of what they're alluding to. But anyway, lots of math in that. In fact, you'll see me looking down. This is like some of the notes that I had taken, some of the math that I was jotting down, trying to get my get all my bearings, you know, lined up, ducks in a bearing. Anyway, you get the idea. But the funny thing is that for what you're going to be getting with this new car, if all the math that I came up with works out, and I can't imagine that it doesn't, if what they're going to be putting out falls in lockstep with this, what you're going to be looking at is, in essence, a pretty garden variety E85 combination or a flex fuel combination coming from Dodge that walks in lockstep with what a lot of guys have been doing with Hellcats and Red Eyes for a long time in the aftermarket. Now look, this isn't criticism on my part for Dodge. In fact, if anything, if this does play out the way that I'm hoping that it does, it's going to show that Dodge is really going out with a bang. And although I have been very critical coming into this last of the last call cars, in Call It BS where I felt like I saw it, which was everywhere, but I have to give credit where it's due. And in this case, if they're going to run with a 298 pulley drive ratio, and if they are going to be running with, again, the 3-liter supercharger and everything else, you're looking at a combination that's going to be somewhere between 18 and 19 psi of boost. I mean, that's literally walking in lockstep with every 2-pulley Hellcat that's running around out there. It's basically going to be roughly 1,000 horsepower at the flywheel. It depends on how they mess with the calibration. I'm feeling it's going to be rated at 945 horsepower, give or take. And with a dyno adjusted number looking somewhere around 1,000 horsepower. And the reason why I say that is because the CFM agrees with that number, that 1582 CFM agrees with what would be in essence the normal conversions for CFM to horsepower. It walks in lockstep with that. The numbers to generate, in other words, the pulley ratios and the blower size to generate 1500 CFM, along with the throttle body size and the snout size, all agrees with that. The numbers land right on top of each other. One thing I didn't do a good job in that video of doing was talking about the difference in the throttle body sizes from the stock 92 to the 105. It's basically a 10% difference in throttle body opening. That's where that extra 10% came in when I was doing all the math for you guys on that. Anyway, it basically added up almost identical to it. And again, there are efficiency plays you got to work with, certain aspects of the assembly that are unique to that assembly. You can't just fall into the math, but it's so close. The numbers are right on top of each other. So yeah, I know that I cracked it. I know that that's what that's going to be. And if it's not, I'd be shocked. But, the cool thing is that we've got, a couple of more of these things coming up here pretty soon. So they'll give us some more ideas as far as what we're looking at. But in general, that's what we're going to be seeing. But the interesting thing, other than this car that's coming, the roided up leprechaun yelling into the breathalyzer, cool video, the pounds thing. That one, I guess for me, the pounds video, density is what it's called. That one was the one that was a little bit like, you could have done it. It could have been shown in a different way. I'd have had the guy cramming something, some kind of a pressure. Anyway, and getting back to it, that 7.1 pounds mathematically, and I illustrate that in the video, it falls right on top of the math that I put together. So between the throttle body, the pulley ratio, the new pulley and everything else, it's right. We're right on top of that. So, let's see. Marco's saying the turbo's coming, turbo in coming along. Very nice. Howardale saying, I hope this last Challenger is all that. We shall see. Man, I tell you what. Oh, this is the point that I was trying to get to, and before I just kind of drifted off. One of the things that Red Dog is in. What's up, man? One of the things that I have to say, and again, great words do. Hopefully, this technology waterfalls. It looks like some of the stage kits are starting to come through on direct connection. I don't know how well received, though, any of those are. And I guess what I mean by that is I don't see anybody raving about them yet. I don't see anybody really talking about them. And I haven't had an opportunity to visit with anybody from my, I guess you could call it local direct connection dealer, mainly because out of sight, out of mind. It's kind of strange that none of those kits, none of those stage kits has really been talked about. And of course, there's still nothing that I could find for the naturally aspirated guys. I don't expect anything to really come from that either, because there's just no real strong way to justify the minor gains that you get versus the headaches that you're going to go through to try to get it all past EPA and all that good stuff. And to that point, the stage kits are basically race gas calibrations. It's kind of like having the little doodad, the high octane software. You have that in your hand for like in the handheld in that Trinity. So I guess that's why some guys are really not falling in love with it. They can see it as being a little bit jinky. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not seeing a whole lot of pub on that. If you guys are seeing something like that, please share it with me, because like I say, I just haven't seen anything on that. But speaking of not seeing anything on anything, well, here we are again. We're coming into what is practically the middle of March now. And what we're not seeing is really anything from any of these other manufacturers. Ford basically has already given us what we're going to see with the Mustang, but realistically, we're not seeing anything coming from Chevrolet, which is a real shame. We keep hearing about the Z06, the E-Ray. That's a Corvette brand more than anything else type of a play. I'm not really looking at the Corvettes as a Chevy. Like, I wouldn't even think of anything with a Corvette name brand on it being associated even remotely with Chevrolet right now. So if that's what you're going to basically default to, if somebody says, well, what's Chevrolet doing for performance? Well, the Corvette, the Corvette's really its own brand. Chevrolet proper isn't doing anything. And with the Camaro going away, it just leaves the Mustang to rule the roost once again for internal combustion hot rods. And unfortunately, with Dodge not showing any interest in bringing us something very cool like the Z car from Nissan, or like the Supra from Toyota/BMW, or the Z4 from BMW for that matter. With Dodge not really wanting to get into that game, I think that there's a lot of Dodge guys that are starting to wane a little bit from the brand. And I don't see a lot of folks getting worked up over the brand of Dodge the way that I used to. In fact, remember a long time ago, it seems like forever ago, when I was talking about where to find, let me ask you that, do any of you old schoolers out there, do y'all remember what I used to say, where do you want to find a really good deal on a used Mopar? And the answer to that was in the used car lot of your local Ford dealership. So many guys at one point had been breaking out of the Dodge mold, mainly because Dodge was not innovating the 392. The 5.7 didn't really get affected by this because guys that have 5.7s usually trade up to a 392, but guys that get into 392s, a lot of times they get frustrated with them just because they want to modify the cars or do whatever. Long story short, it was one of these weird phenomenons where you'd see a used car section in a Ford dealership, and there'd be 3 or 4 Challengers sitting in the used car lot. So, but in this case, I think it's going to be about tenfold worse. And the reason why I say that is just from the feedback I've been getting from some of you guys, you're not really all that interested in holding on to your Mopars, whether it's a Hellcat, a 5.7, a 6.4. A lot of folks have been intimating to me that they will be moving over to Ford. And more to that point, it's moving back over to Ford because a lot of Mopar guys have Ford backgrounds. Matter of fact, more ex-Ford guys own Mopars than ex-Chevrolet guys that own Mopars by a magnitude different. It's just orders of magnitude different there. But it's rare to find old Mopar buying into the latest, newest Mopars. So it's kind of an interesting thing there. And what all that basically boils down to is this. With Dodge not making anything cool and new, a lot of dudes are looking at Fords again, and that Mustang is getting a lot of pre-release love. Let's leave it at that. Jason's asking, would I need a retune for my 309 swap if I have my trans tuned with the 262? Talking about the 309 swap, are you talking about a Hellcat or either one of the cars? So if you've got a 5.7 with a 262 and you're swapping over to a 309, no, you really won't need any kind of tuning to go along with that. If you are taking the car to the drag strip and you're going to be running that car at the drag strip on a drag pack wheel and tire setup, you may need to have a few things adjusted just to work with the adaptive shift strategy. it'll have sometimes a nasty habit of yipping a shift. Now, that would be very rare for an NA car to deal with. Now, if you have a Hellcat and you're going from a 262 to a 309, the same applies. No, initially you don't have to have anything really done to your tune. You can just swap the gears, plug and play, and you can rock out. But you won't get the best performance out of it. You really do need to, and when I say performance, that's not only objective but subjective. So you will need to have the driver command torque tables elevated. In other words, you're going to need to put some pedal sensitivity into the thing. If it's a Hellcat, mainly because the car is going to feel a little bit non-responsive. It's counterintuitive. You think, oh, I'm putting a more aggressive gear in the car, it should be real lively. Well, it is when you really shower down on it, but on partial throttle tip in, it won't be. It's because there's just no load. Load creates cylinder pressure, and when you've got a supercharger sitting on top of an engine, that actually helps boost response. And so it'll feel a little bit sluggish, make the pedal a little bit more lively, and you get all of that back, and then it feels like what you expected it to feel like when you put the gear in. For the NA stuff, not so much. It's going to be punchy pretty much no matter what. But the idea with that, again, the big difference is if you're taking the car to a drag strip, you're going to want to have some parameters changed so that you don't yip shifts. And again, what the yip is the predictive shift algorithm thinking that you are going to hit a rev limiter before you do. And it's before it completes the shift. And so it'll initiate the shift very early, or it'll chop throttle to initiate the shift where it wouldn't have done that before. So it takes a little bit of finagling to get it right. Some cars are more sensitive than others. I can't really tell you like year by year which ones get a little bit more sensitive to that. I can tell you that my 2015 Hellcat was kind of sensitive. It wasn't all that bad, but my car is a little bit different cat. For some reason, that thing, it just didn't really care all that much. It would really only get a little bit weird with a yip shift if the DA was really, really low. In other words, the air was really, really cold. Then it would do it just because the car was accelerating faster than normal. But anyway, you don't want to get too aggressive with these settings, though. A lot of times, what guys used to do is they would basically take the nuclear option and start eliminating. They would practically start eliminating rev limiters, and that's a sure, easy way to launch a motor. So, be have a little common sense in there, but your tuner should know what to do with that. But anyway, and Ardell's saying he's not really into Corvettes, are nice, but not for me. You know, the funny thing about Corvette, in fact, I'm wearing a Corvette shirt now that I think about it. I am a 2-time recovering Corvette owner. I'm also a 3-time recovering Viper owner. But I can tell you that I grew up around Corvettes. Corvettes for me were just another member of the family, whether it was big block C3s, small block later C3s. I had a C4 and I had a C5 Z06. They're really good cars in terms of durability, or they were, I should say. This is again going back in time, the Wayback Machine over here. But the problem is now they're not an everyman's car. And what used to be a car that anybody, any guy or gal that was into cars, if they wanted a Corvette, once you got to a certain place in life, it was a situation where if you took on an extra couple of shifts a week, or took on an extra couple of accounts, or knocked out a couple of nights worth of overtime, you could afford the Vet, right? And it was a cool thing to have. And it kind of meant that you were working hard for something. For a lot of guys, it was a badge of honor in a way. And it ain't like that anymore. I mean, these cars cars in general are obnoxiously expensive, but Vets right now are just off the charts. Like, I don't see the value in where the Corvette is now in terms of dollar per performance. I mean, they're really good. Don't get me wrong. These things have got the sophistication level, like they're like UFO spaceship level sophisticated in terms of launch control and acceleration based on just the amount of power all of that. I understand how good they are in that respect, but I would probably not go for one just because to me, all of that extra stuff that it's capable of doing is removing the human element from the driving experience. It's supposed to be a driver's car, but yet it's doing all of the driving for you. I kind of feel like I'm just along for the ride at that point. By the way, allergies down here are a freaking trip. So tree allergies, tree pollen, which I'm typically not all that, like it doesn't really freak me out, but dude, it has like got me all kinds of snapped up. So I don't know how deep I'm going to be getting into this show before I've got to pull a plug, because I'm going to be over here scratching my face and, sneeze. I'm about to start sneezing over here. Red Dog saying, honestly, how much of a pain is a rear seat delete? And once installed, can you fold the back seat down and put stuff straight through the trunk into the back of the interior? Okay, so the rear seat delete is a solid panel, so that you can't fold it down. But you pick up about, 3 or 4 inches of trunk space, I guess. You can't put it down, but you can't really put the seats down either. So it's basically just walls off the back part of the car. So there's that. As far as to install it, it's more of a pain to install, just in that everything is very lightweight and kind of flimsy, if you will. So you're almost scared you're going to tear something up. One thing I will say is if you do decide to tackle this project, when you're taking the seat belt hardware out of the car, it's a T50 is what is used to hold everything into the body of the car for the hardware. Use a very new T50 bit, and don't try to just get in there and rip it. Be real deliberate with how you're applying torque to get that thing out, because if you don't, you will strip that thing and you'll end up like me on the first one that I ever did. I had to drill one of those things out. It wasn't any fun. So just kind of word to the wise there. From an installation point of view. Jason saying, I wish they still made the Viper like the Corvettes. Like you said earlier, I stay loyal to Ford and Dodge. First vehicle was F-150 and still have it running with 185,000 miles. Fell in love with the Charger. Very nice. It'd be cool if they just made something that was cool. A lot of people look at the Corvette and they don't see a cool car. A lot of guys looked at the C6, for example. A lot of people saw the C6 as just a really cool sports car. The C7, one of the issues with the C7 was the rear wheel backspacing threw a lot of people off for the Stingray. The Grand Sport looks phenomenal, but the Stingray, just the regular Stingray, kind of threw some people off. Didn't really have a beefy look to it. But again, the Grand Sport looks great. Of course, the Z06, one of my all-time favorite cars to drive. So with the C7, they really got it right. But the problem is that there is no more C7. And that's the last one where you had an actual manual transmission, an actual human-machine interface that wasn't just a button and a steering wheel. Yeah, I get how much better and faster the newer car is, but at some point, I know that, best is only best until better shows up to the party, but sometimes better is just, it's just off-putting. And in this case, when there is no driver interface with the car, the way that we're all used to it, when you lose that tactile input and machine feedback, you lose what makes a sports car a sports car. So, when you start to lose the feel and you stop having that, that machine human interface, talking mainly about a manual transmission, but when you lose that option for a car like that, it takes something away. Congrats on that F-150, by the way. Just keep changing the oil. You'll be good. Keep up with all those fluid changes. No Average is in. What's up, everybody? What's up, Noab? Sovereign saying hello. Red Dog saying, I read there's a new Viper in the works, but it's electric. So let me give you my 2 cents on that. If Dodge decides that they want to come out with an electric Viper, great, fantastic, good for them. It will have to get in line and follow up with the Banshee because that's their go-to car, right? So it's going to have to get in line and fall in lockstep with that thing, potentially not necessarily garnering any love from the general public in terms of the car public and the buying public. It will, if they did make it, because I had heard this rumor myself, and I thought, well, that's pretty neat. If all we're talking about is a one-trick pony, that everybody else has a pony that does the same trick. The only way that the Viper works realistically is if they Hellcat swap it with an aluminum block. That to me puts me in the running for a Viper. Without that power plant, I don't care how fast it is. I don't care if it goes 0 to 60 in 1 second. None of that. I'm probably not going to be super interested in it because, let's be real, guys, that thing's going to be so expensive that it's not even... It will. I'll put it to you like this. It will be so expensive that people won't have any interest in it. Let me ask you. I'll put it to you in these terms. What is the name? What is the Lamborghini name that comes to your mind when I say Lamborghini? Can you name all the Lamborghini variants? What about Koenigsegg? Or what about Zonda? What about any of these cars that don't really matter to you in a day in, day out environment? The thing is that's cool, the thing that was always cool about muscle cars or Corvettes in general, the Viper can kind of fall in line with this, is that you would see them. They were part of your daily life, in essence. I mean, these were things that you would see. Somebody cruising down the road in a Vette, somebody cruising down the road in, I don't know, pick whatever kind of muscle car you like. You would see these cars running around. Well, when you start getting into these stratospheric price points, they really just start to look more like a vanity project on behalf of the manufacturer. And that's not a soul-bearing car. It's kind of a narcissistic, just, I don't know, what do you call that? Because it doesn't really embody the soul of the manufacturer unless that's all that the manufacturer produces. See, the point that I'm trying to make is this. I can't rattle off every Ferrari that's out there, but if you say Ferrari, I know that it's a sports car company and I know that it's a high-end thing. In much the same way you might think of a Rolex as being the Kleenex of luxury watches. I don't know a bunch of watch names, but I can tell you I know Rolex. Tag Heuer maybe. I don't know if that falls in the same I don't know, altitude is, but you see what I'm saying, right? Well, the problem is when you start to try to tart up a brand like Corvette. Corvette is an everyman sports car that's been turned into and is trying to become its own luxury performance brand. Again, I can't tell you how many Aston Martins are out there, but I know that if I saw one, it would be an expensive ass car, and it's a luxury brand. That's kind of where Corvette's going. And unfortunately, it might be what's happened or what may happen if they come out with the Viper. Again, for me, I'm only cool with the Viper if it's got, like I say, some kind of a aluminum block Hemi, really cool sports car. Okay, so conversations that I've had about EVs and really fast EVs, have all gone like this. I don't care what powers the thing. I'm really only interested in fast. I'm only interested in performance. How can I dig into the computer and make it even faster, make it even more fun to drive? What kind of torque management can I remove? What can I do to make this thing more fun, in other words? Because that's really all you're dealing with EV tuning is a lot of torque management. Well, they all do that though. They're all very, very fast. And so there's nothing that separates them. I'll put it to you like this. That at one point in time, there was a platform called the skateboard platform. And the idea was you could literally pull into your driveway, pick up the top portion of the vehicle, scoot it over, have another one sit down on it, and have two different cars based on the same platform. To me, EVs are starting to look a lot like that. Even if they are fast, right on time. Even if the car is extremely fast, I'm actually moving further and further away from EVs as something that I'm interested in. At first, I was extremely interested in them. And just because I know how the technology works, I'm cool with that level of technology, and I know how I can make them go faster if given the opportunity, and I know what they can be capable of just from a performance standpoint, and they will be that fast on the street, not just at the drag strip. But again, until batteries get where they need to be, until charging becomes something that is faster and less intrusive to somebody's life and pocketbook, I just have a harder and harder time getting around the idea that basically a speed controller, some batteries, and some electric motors cost so much. To me, it's a cash grab. It should not be that expensive. And I guess that's really the point that I'm trying to get to that's associated with where I'm going with this is not only was I more interested because it's just how fast can I make it go, just a different power plant, but it should be cheaper. It should technically be cheaper, realistically, than internal combustion stuff. It takes a lot less labor to make it. It's as simple as it gets in terms of installation itself, like just putting the thing together, but it's also as simple as it gets from a technology point of view. It's just battery technology that you're working on. It's not putting electricity into a chemical form and then powering electric motor with it. Been doing that for a long time. So the realities of the technology are ancient and very cheap. It's just the technology to make things go for a long time on said charge. Well, that's fantastic. Get that technology where it needs to be, but not at the cost of it. I mean, the cost of it right now is just way too high. Let's see. Cap saying, I saw your latest 5.7 mods video last week. Is any of the suspension worth upgrading with regards to performance or reaction time? Spring shocks, sway bars, control arms? Not if you've got a 5.7, no. I wouldn't even remotely go near it. Maybe put a differential brace in it, but that would be about as far into suspension mods as I would get. I had Spawn trailing arms, camber arms on my SRT. They were noisy, didn't really help all that much. BMR makes a good trailing arm and super easy to install. And with that, maybe there was a slight difference in the tendency for the car to wheel hop, but a lot of that had to do with more tire pressure than anything else. So if it's my car, no, I wouldn't bother with it. I haven't done anything to Revlon whatsoever, and I mean, she's dead on at the track. Jay's saying, with the Viper and Corvette being the same price range as far as the last year of the Viper, and which would be better performance-wise? Corvettes might be easier to build with more parts available. So if it were me and somebody were to say, hey, which would you rather have, a Viper or a Vette, talking about the C7 Corvette or the last generation of the Viper, man, it would be a tough decision for me. I love the Viper to death, but the Viper to me, It depends on if you wanted to modify the car or not. If you wanted to leave it stock or just put like a rear gear in the Viper, then do that. Tune it, put a set of long tubes on it. But don't try to take over the world with that platform. You're just not going to get there from here. But the thing with the Vet, the C7, especially if it's like a Grand Sport or a Z06, if something weird happens to that car, you can get it fixed anywhere and not worry about the car at the dealership, for example. It's a Vet. They're understressed. Parts are cheap. And if you want to modify the thing, I mean, dude, come on now. It's a freaking LT-based V8. I mean, yeah. So for me, if someone were to just throw me a set of keys and ask me to go for it, C7 Z06 would be real. Both of them being manual transmissions, obviously. Compare apples to apples there, because there was never an automatic offer in the Viper. I got to tell you, the C7 Z06 is really hard to beat, not only because of how the car runs, but just because it is so ergonomically so good. The Viper ergonomically is not as comfortable. The Viper is something that you tolerate. The Corvette is something that you anticipate, like you want to drive the thing. So if it sounds like I'm kind of pooing all over the Viper, it's just that I would want the Viper, but I would know that the Vet is a better car. I'll put it to you like that. When I saw her saying Diablo, when I said name a Lambo, he's saying he likes the concept of the C8, especially the Z06 version, but the current prices, new or used, are freaking ludicrous. Hard to spot or hard to love an everyman sports car that costs the same as a house. Just saying, hey, listen, I mean, when you look at how much that car costs. So I was actually talking to my dad about this, and we were kind of going around and around. This has been a while back, but if you look at the cost of a Chevy Silverado, I think the number was like 1.5 times the cost of a Chevy Silverado, right? That's kind of the traditional number that these things would run. But the problem is that, a Chevy Silverado realistically is going to cost out the door around, you shouldn't pay more than about $43,000 in 2023. I know that they've been going for more, but get the idea. That puts the Vet at around $60,000, give or take. The average selling price of a C8 Corvette, the last time I looked, was about $87,000. Is that right? Like, it was 82 and it went up to 85. It's probably at 87 now. That's a very far cry from what a base model would cost you. And so it's not that you can't maybe find a Vet that's that inexpensive, but you're not going to find one on a lot. And that's, even if you order, I don't even know if you can order one anymore that would fit that same criteria. Let's see. He's saying he's got a basic petty tower brace on the front and Speed Logic arched on the back, and I think it makes a nice difference driving on the street. Also have the BMR lower trailing arms. I like them. Yeah, the lower trailing arms did a pretty good job. We were running those on the Demon, as a matter of fact. They did well. The strut tower braces, I know quite a few guys swear by those. Smoke saying, hey, B. Mason, do you know of any good Canadian Hemi tuners? I keep getting turned down by local tuners and a few offered remote dyno tuning. Don't know any in Canada. You can give Alex Peitz, that's Peitz, a shout down here in Houston. And for remote tuning, he can probably get you squared away. It would be tough. I don't know. I just don't know of anybody off the top of my head, but he may be able to, if you need somebody local. He's got a lot of connections with HP tuners, so he may be able to get you tied in with somebody there. And you can also get a hold of HP tuners. Just hit them up on their customer service line and ask them who they've got in your area. Bullet saying he's autocrossing a Saturn Sky. I don't listen. There was a group of dudes. So talk about like doing stuff like that. Let me think about this for a minute. Do you guys remember It was, oh God, this is actually kind of funny. The Honda, was it the Insight? What was the one that looked like an egg? It was one of the very first hybrid cars. Anyway, where I'm going with this is back in the day when I was like really big into roll racing, the Viper stuff, it was Vets, Vipers, and Supras. LSs were coming big on the scene at the time. Lots of turbo stuff, lots of turbo nitrous cars hitting the scene. Anyway, back then, what a lot of the guys would do, they were big into going fast, but yeah, the rear wheels did cover up the tires. Yeah, it was the wheel well covered them up. So what a lot of guys did though back then is they would eco rod those Insights, and the original trick or goal, and these were like hardcore racers. These were guys that were hitting open track events, roll racing, doing some really like sketch level midnight stuff. Most of these cars were all, if you were to put them on a drag strip, would all go, I'd say mid nines at about 145, 147. I mean, they were fast top end cars. Anyway, point that I'm getting to is these are all manual cars too. Anyway, they would, as into racing as they were equally as into fuel economy, and they would eco rod those Insights. And the goal was to get 60. That was the, I guess, the cover charge to even get into the conversation with some of these guys, was to get that thing to like 60 or 65 miles per gallon. But these guys would start taking it to extreme levels, and then it went from that to like 75. I mean, it was just crazy. So as deep as they were into going really, really fast, they were also just as into extracting every freaking inch they could out of every just molecule of gasoline. So anyway, that was kind of a fun, it was just kind of an interesting thing. These guys are just really, in fact, some of them got more into the eco rod thing than they did in the hot rodding thing. So that was kind of funny. But, which kind of leads me into this deal with Dodge. So, Dodge, no sports cars to talk about, no muscle cars to talk about, but you got the Hornet coming down the line. And man, I know that I've talked about the Hornet before, and I haven't been all that welcoming, I guess is the best way you could put it. I would say that is about the most polite way you could put my analysis of that particular vehicle, probably because it's just another crossover to me. And I get that they're going to do some hot rod stuff, and that's all great and cool, but it's just another crossover. Dodge has not done a very good job with their crossovers. And again, you look at the Journey, the LX platform has outsold that car over and over and over again. So it's one of those things where you just kind of go, man, if your muscle car is outselling the car that is supposed to be your like driver of volume, that can be kind of tough. So I don't know. It's someone saying the Nitro. I mean the Nitro. Who even remembers it? So I guess for me it becomes more and more of a play where you don't really have a strong sense of what their brand or what their branding is. I'll tell you what, with that, hang on just 1 second. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. But you don't get a sense that the branding is really there for those types of vehicles, and you have to have a really good small car if you're going to make muscle cars. If you don't have that really good small economy car, you're never going to drive volume enough to be able to realistically have muscle cars to sell. You've got to create revenue, and that's where those small cars come into play. And the thing is that the companies that do that really well don't make muscle cars. Kia, Hyundai, fantastic small, cheap, reliable transportation. Honda, same kind of thing. You don't see Nissan struggling to sell Rogues, and they're making Z cars, and the Rogues just keep driving around. They don't break down, in other words. You know, I guess Dodge just hasn't got that figured out yet. And the problem that I have is that when they tried to put something out there, it just seemed like a half effort. But I remember the Nitro was actually really cool. I just cannot understand why it didn't really gain any traction. It was weird. Someone's asking, do I think the Dart might return? I don't know. I mean, the Dart's kind of a neat car if they could get it or do it right. Red Dog saying, wife saw the Hornet commercial tonight and said, that looks cute and fast. I simply walked out of the room. Yeah. Yeah, Red Dog saying Nitro was a Jeep. It was, but I mean, it's still Dodge-ish, like it's Dodge adjacent. I'm trying to find something to tie one of the brands to something cool. In other words, you go to your Dodge Jeep Ram dealer and wow, look, we're here to get this, little Nitro, but hey, look, there's a Challenger and there's a Charger and they're cool looking. There's a Ram RT, sweet. You had the option there. You had an opportunity to see those vehicles while you were getting your small family car. And now you just don't see that same drive, and I get that, a lot of times they're trying to leverage the brand strength of Jeep, but that only plays in a very myopic way. In other words, a very short-sighted way. And I also think, just now that we're talking about them, I think that there's been more damage done to the Jeep brand because they've tried to release vehicles that aren't Jeep-ish. They're Jeep in image, but they don't do any Jeep type stuff realistically. And so, it's just a watering down of the brand, and it's something that we just keep seeing. So, in saying all of that, I'm hoping that what we end up finding is that maybe the Hemi isn't totally dead. Maybe whatever is coming down the line for us in terms of hybrid technology or whatever the case is, can have something of at least somewhat resembling soul, or it'll have some type of vibrance to it that performance enthusiasts can be attracted to, because the way that it works now, it just doesn't work out. Sovereign saying hydrogen Hemi. If you only knew the headaches that it realistically takes to make hydrogen work, it would blow your mind, literally. So there's a lot of issues with making hydrogen work as a fuel. One of the things when I was really young, as a matter of fact, that I was extremely interested in was how to create a hydrogen cell that would not basically be either too heavy to have in a car to hold the kind of pressures that you would need to not only have enough BTUs on board, in other words, enough energy on board in the hydrogen to fuel the car long term, but how to keep it a liquid. The problem with hydrogen is that you got a lot of weird problems. Hydrogen's a real weird thing to play with. So whenever you have hydrogen and you compress it, keep in mind, this all takes energy, right? So you're compressing hydrogen that you got from methane, by the way. You're not getting this from water electrolysis because it's too hard. It's too happy of a bond with 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. They love that bond. But the reason why you get hydrogen from methane or natural gas, it's the easiest to break down. And remember, it's a hydrocarbon. That means carbon with a bunch of hydrogens attached to it. Ta-da! That's why they use fossil fuels to extract hydrogen. It's a weaker molecular bond, and you can get a lot of hydrogen for the same actual volume. So anyway, that part of it out of the way, which is always kind of funny because people think hydrogen, it just comes out of water. And it's like, no, bro, that don't come out of water. That's coming out of natural gas. But getting back to it, hydrogen as a gas, it's extremely reactive, has a very wide stoichiometric value. In other words, it'll burn with a little bit. It'll actually oxygenate, which is to say burn, at very lean mixtures and very rich mixtures if you're thinking of gasoline. But the issue is that it takes a lot of hydrogen to make power. And it's hard to contain that because to make it a liquid means you have to compress the hell out of it. So you have to have a vessel that'll hold the actual volume. And then that volume is extremely cold. And then it starts to heat up, right? So then the pressure is building. Well, remember how small hydrogen is. It's number 1 on the periodic table. It's the smallest atom. So it can, okay, give you an example. Have you ever had a helium balloon? And you have the helium balloon, then a couple of days go by and the pressure is not quite as much, and then a few more days go by and like you can really squish it, and a few more days go by. It's because helium is number 2 on the periodic table as far as size, and it just can fit between the latex molecules of the balloon that's holding it, even under pressure. Hydrogen does the same thing. So, and it can actually, once it starts heating up, it wants to keep expanding and expanding and expanding. There's only so much pressure the vessel can hold, so it'll start to vent hydrogen. And if you've ever seen old videos or even later videos of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen rockets, the venting that's going on are the hydrogen tanks venting hydrogen gas or oxygen in some cases. It's the pressure is just getting higher and higher and higher. That's what can happen. They'll actually start to vent the tank. So, and that's one of the issues. So you have this ever decreasing fuel capacity that after some amount of time we'll have to self-purge to keep the tanks from rupturing. It's a real pain. Not to mention, yes, when you oxygenate hydrogen, that's water, but it also has high NOx values. And so there's other issues that keep hydrogen from being an actual viable fuel source. It's kind of a weird thing. You would think that it would be just super intuitive. Oh, you just make it run on hydrogen. And in principle, it works great. And people have done it. They've done it for a long time just as an experiment. But the reality of it is that it's too expensive to create the hydrogen. It's too expensive to store the hydrogen. It's too dangerous to store the hydrogen. And it takes so much hydrogen that even in liquid form to generate the power that you would need to move something around the way that gasoline does, it's even in liquid form, it's like 4 or 5 times the amount of volume that you would really need. So kind of an odd thing. It works great as a rocket fuel though. But you know, there's other alternative fuels, right? I mean, you've got ethanol, E85. I mean, that's a great one. And gasoline ain't all that bad. I mean, it's come a very long way. So, you know, I get that a lot of people talk about anything that runs on a hydrocarbon fuel as a bad thing, but the reality is that from an energy density point of view, in other words, how much energy you can extract from a specific amount of volume, it is extremely difficult to beat a hydrocarbon-based fuel. So this is kind of how that works out. But anyway, guys, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because I'm about to have a sneezing fit, like right here in front of you guys. And so I'm going to shut it down. But I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me. Could not, would not do this without you. Love each and every one of y'all. Guys, get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it way more than you know. And with that, we will catch y'all on the next one. Y'all have a great one. Adios.